theatre, film, TV and more. Suzy Wrong reviews it all on Joy Drive with Em and Warren.
Suzy Wrong, I am so thrilled to say we are welcoming you live in studio this afternoon.
Look, I've always been live.
Yes.
Oh, that's true, yeah.
No one's lying about that. But it's the first time I'm doing this show with you in the studio on Nam Land, which is very exciting.
Yes.
And we're talking about Victorian queens.
So it's fitting, it's very fitting that you're in Victoria. We're talking about Victorian queens.
Look, I always plan these things perfectly. Not really.
Always live and always perfect. That's Suzy Wrong.
Suzy Wrong, normally in our Joy Drive Sydney studio.
Which is my home.
Tell us about Victorian Queens, which is streaming on iView at the moment.
It's a new Australian documentary about 4 drag queens in Melbourne and Geelong. It is now streaming on ABC iView and on Apple TV at the same time. Asia Buffet, Zodiac, Lady Diamond, and Art Simone. They practice different kinds of drag, each queen with a different relationship to the art of drag, and each one representing a different facet of the queer community. Asia Buffet is Filipino-Australian, a trans woman in the early years of her transition, having discovered her true gender through the exploration of drag. Zodiac is the First Nations queen, descending from the Anawan people from the northern tablelands of New South Wales, who speaks powerfully about Indigenous issues and who uses all the various pronouns. Also very thoughtful is Lady Diamond, a tall, bearded white queen who seems fairly fluid with her gender and goes by the pronouns she and they. Finally, Art Simone is perhaps a more conventional type of white queen and the only one with international fame, having been a participant in the first RuPaul's Drag Race Down Under in 2021. The 45-minute documentary is somewhat innocuous. It doesn't go into traumatic dark spaces that many queer docs have done historically. It aims to show us a more positive side of queer life, or at least one that seems somewhat normal, rather than perpetuating the portrayal of our existence as being shaped only by prejudice and persecution. These queens are successful in their own ways and all have an abundance of joy to share to the camera. I would have liked some drama to arise, but I guess I can always just switch over to the housewives at any time for that. Em and Warren, changed my mind, but as a visitor, it looks like Victoria is a real drama-free zone.
Oh, 100%. We have no drama whatsoever. Everything is chill here in Victoria.
Because all the troublemakers are in Sydney for Mardi Gras.
100%. I've said this over and over again.
But it wasn't the diversity in the queens amazing. I mean, there was so much diversity. Each queen was so different.
Yeah, I think that was the main thing. I think that was really considered and premeditated. I don't know how difficult it was for them to get to those final 4, but I would say that was a good decision to do that, and it was really important because they made the program rich because they're from such different backgrounds and from such different perspectives. Traditionally, like if we had done this documentary 20 years ago, especially. It would be 4 very similar queens who look the same and who experience the same things, and then probably there won't be much to look at, much to talk about.
I'll play devil's advocate for a moment here. My big question, maybe one of you can answer, is why? Why do we need this? Why do we need this? Because I feel like we don't need this, you know? The series, or the show rather. I understand it was great to see the diversity within the drag community here in Victoria. Amazing. It highlighted that we've got, POC nights for drag queens now. It highlighted that there are different venues where you can see drag. But as a whole, I'm kind of like, why?
All right, you want to keep answering your own question?
Yeah, well.
Well, I think...
I guess I did answer my question.
I think drag queens are our figureheads, sort of. Mm-hmm. They're like, do so much of our leadership work, especially with Asia, who's also a trans woman in there. I think when you look at them and you examine what they're experiencing, you sort of can see what queer people's lives are and sort of the trajectory of our progress and our advancement. And like I said, now earlier, I compare it to 20 years ago, what would things have looked like? And you kind of sort of see, this is where we're moving, and the style of drag that these people are doing are, from my perspective, very, very evolved from what it used to be when drag was only in smallish clubs. And, they were mainly of just like insult comics, right? Back in the day, they were just all trying to be as funnier than one another. But things are a little bit different now. They're all doing, having different approaches, have different understanding of the world, and they're representing their lives differently on stage.
Just to clarify, I was playing devil's advocate. So I was asking purely to get that response, Suzy. I don't think that it's not a justified piece of
I know
TV.
I can't censor the glare from my eye, my side eye, when I'm in the studio.
But you are right, though, because 20 years ago, we would have just, everyone would have been the same. And if we look at Asia in particular, I mean, Asia is a Filipino background as well. And something that stood out for me about Asia is, and I suppose all of them in some ways, is this real intrinsic, true confidence that they had and that drag enabled them to be. It wasn't fake. I didn't get any impression that their confidence was, some sort of facade that they're putting on to mask it, an insecurity. They were really confident. And Asia in particular, she was just so confident. She's gone through her transition and her drag has evolved as such. And I thought, wow, this is really good to see.
Yeah, look at her and I think it's, she's experiencing a moment of what's known as gender euphoria. As opposed to dysphoria, because she looks like, to me, she's in the early stages of transition, and it's exciting for her. She's, getting rid of the things that have been making life difficult for her. All the expectations and all the rules that she was following that didn't work for her, and now she's sort of shedding that and finding a new personality that's closer to who she really is. So I guess that's what the authenticity you're talking about. And a really good point is that it's a recent thing that when we talk about drag queens in the public domain, that trans people are included, because 20 years ago, if a documentary like that had been made, there wouldn't be a trans woman in there, even though drag was always created by trans women. But once they became trans women, you kind of leave them behind, you forget them, and you sort of forget that legacy that they've created. So it's important that Asia was included in this.
And if we look at Asia, and we do want to talk about the other queens as well, but if we look at Asia and her confidence that she had from, having transitioned and having, being herself, being a drag queen at the same time, if we look at that energy, I couldn't help but I think to myself, now, if she hadn't transitioned, imagine that energy reversed and being put into hiding herself, and to making sure that no one knows, or that I fit into society, or, I'm this person, I don't stand out, I can't be picked on. All that potential energy that I suppose we all in our own stories have in some ways, and then hers has just been released, like bang, like some sort of explosion. And I just quantified it for me. It made me realise how much we put into trying to be someone else.
Well, it's an interesting story, Aisha's, because I feel like without drag, she potentially wouldn't have had the opportunity to now become this fully realised, authentically very confident person. It's almost like, and she even says this, I think, in the show, she kind of says, I used it as a mask and now I don't need to wear the mask, but I just enjoy doing it. And that's why I've continued to do drag. But I, used this as the kind of like the stepping stone into my own journey, which was a nice kind of thing to see from her.
It was a very similar experience for me because when I was younger, maybe because I grew up in Asia as well, drag, so the idea of a performance character was the only way that you can sort of inhabit the femininity, a certain kind of femininity. And through that, for me, it's just that discovery of something that somehow feels more authentic than what you are used to in your daily life. It's a really strange thing, I guess, because I always question, like, why does one feel more real than the other when on the surface it just looks like, well, it's just A and B, or 1 and 2. Why does one just make more sense than the other? Do you know what I mean? Like,
totally.
If you're not considering what your genitals look like and all that, but what is it that makes it that way? And I don't know if anybody knows. I don't know if there's a conclusive answer for that, but the authenticity that you experience just kind of makes it that you know who you are, and then for some, unfortunately, it's a really difficult journey, but hopefully the degree to which things have changed, I hope that it's easier. And drag being one of the ways that people can discover themselves. And, not just gender, but in other parts of your life, other bits about your life that might be you feel inappropriate or you don't know how to place in your real life. But with through performance, through drag, you see that, it's not gender that I like about this character I've created, but this is something else that's missing from my life.
Yeah, potentially something I couldn't say within my body normally.
Yeah, so the idea that drag being sort of an art form that's absurd, that is sort of really over the top, I guess that it requires you to really push the boundaries. Drag needs to push the boundaries, otherwise it's kind of pointless and it's not drag. And when you're pushing the boundaries, I guess maybe for your own personal experience of your own life, you might experience something that's actually more true to yourself.
We are joined in the studio by Suzy Rong, and we're talking about Victorian Queens, which is currently streaming on iTunes and Apple TV. Something, Em and Suzy, that I noticed throughout watching it was each of the queens is making a safe space for their audience in their own way, and they all had a different audience, but they were creating a safe space. And I didn't see that bitchiness that sometimes we do see associated with drag, that I'll be honest has turned me off drag in the past. I don't like people being bitchy to people or putting people down for the sake of trying to be funny. That didn't come across with any of these queens.
Yeah, I think the world has changed a lot, and I wouldn't say that in this case drag has led the change in turning kindness into a cool thing, but I think it's followed and it's learned that you can still do this kind of performance without all the nastiness that's usually associated with them.
Yeah, I think Lady Diamond's character certainly had an emphasis on that. I'm the matriarchal woman who's going to give you some candy.
Yeah.
Is a very different persona to the person that's going to, give the front row shit for whatever.
Yeah, it's good to see, and I think the undercurrent of this is the influence of the RuPaul series, I think, because drag was always, like I said, tucked away in clubs, and it took someone like RuPaul, the show has been going for over 10 years now, to bring it onto TV and then gradually become a mainstream thing. And and then now we see a documentary like this and we think that, what's the point of this? It's a little bit like,
we know exactly.
Isn't this a bit old news?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's because it's on the screens so much now. So I guess that it's become what's the word for it? Pervasive, I guess. Like it's sort of everywhere. Is a really healthy thing. When you go to any of these drag race associated events, it's not really all LGBTQ. A lot of it is straight women, and a lot of it is young people who don't necessarily look like they're part of the rainbow mafia, as I call it. Sometimes as a queer person, you feel like, this is a bit of an awkward space that I kind of assumed was a queer space, but it is really healthy that this sort of queerness or our values as queer people are being shared, and and I always think that LGBTQIA+ can always accommodate more alphabets, so that's great.
Something else that came across is, we know that, venues are disappearing and we've seen them disappear, but this show showed me there's lots of other venues now that the performers are going to and the audiences are going to. And in some ways I felt, sad for the existing venues that perhaps are struggling for survival and those that are no longer around. But then there's also, on the other hand, the new opportunities and new venues coming up. And maybe that's a good thing that, drag fits in anywhere now. We don't have to have specialised venues. What do you reckon?
One of the positive things I thought when they launched the Down Under, so Australian and New Zealand version of RuPaul's, was that, then we can create these celebrities, every year, like 8 or 10 celebrities are created. And then because they live in our region, then they'll become new stars, and then people can create social events around them. So hopefully that we have drag race stars in our region, that they could be part of sort of a resurgence of our club life, because that's important.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of newness, we actually got a message in from a number ending in 327, which says, another controversial opinion, haven't the queens had enough time for the rise of the king? Drag kings. Now, that's a thing that is slowly becoming more prevalent, and what an interesting, I guess, new layer to what drag is.
Yeah, that's certainly important. It's still a boys' club.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ultimately, a lot of filmmaking, a lot of TV it's about that, and we want. In this case, they've done well to include diversity in terms of including people of color and including an Indigenous person, which I thought was really important, and a really good representation of Indigenous queerness. And then, it was good that they had people in there who were trans or possibly non-binary. That's great. But there is still a blind spot. Gay men often forget that our queer sisters are a crucial part of this whole movement. Like, there's so much that we can't do without our women, because face it, they're amazing. like
True.
If you're watching this last weekend, right? And one thing about the last weekend in Sydney, the Mardi Gras and all that, like, men like the limelight a lot, and it's traditionally been that. But when you're on the ground there, when you're looking at the volunteers, all these women, especially these like middle-aged women there, who have been with us for this ride for the longest time, and they're still doing this like tirelessly, and sort of like quite content, being sort of overshadowed. That's a big part of our community.
And just on that, Suzy, if we go back in time to the height of the AIDS crisis, I mean, it was the women who were helping out the gay men at the time, and that when the call to arms happened, it was the women that came out and helped us.
That's right, and we need to know how to include them. I think when it's run by men, by traditionally white men, there's always this thing where they feel like they need to wait for people to make sort of approach them. They feel like people need to have that same approach, the sort of the same sort of pushiness and gregariousness to get their voice heard. And I think maybe our women, our lesbians, probably approach things a little bit different. So just like people of color can approach things a little bit different. So the inclusiveness needs to be a little bit more radical, a bit more proactive to sort of get
absolutely.
there. Yeah.
Well, Victorian Queens was a step in the right direction in terms of inclusivity.
Yeah.
So that is great. And of course, there is room for a Drag Kings documentary as well. So hopefully we'll be chatting about that shortly, Suzy.
Yeah,
Who
hope
knows?
so. What did you feel like when you got to the end? You were thinking, is there going to be more?
I was looking for more.
It feels a bit like a TV series.
Yeah, and maybe my only criticism would be, in agreeing with you, is a little bit more meat to it. Maybe not drama, but maybe a bit more of the stories behind would have been nice. I did like the Indigenous drag queen Zodiac, because there was something about her. There wasn't the glitter, but she looked amazing.
And the degree of fun that she was having.
Yeah, and her passion for her cause as well that
Absolutely.
came across was really, really strong.
Also, the way that she described herself was hilarious as well. Just like a something Barbie.
Oh, right.
That's right, a bargain Barbie.
Bargain Barbie. I was like, I love that. That's amazing. So good.
Yeah, because it has become like so much ostentation, because, it's framed in a competitive way now because of RuPaul. There's always just the one winner. So when they sort of merge together to do any kind of presentation, any kind of show, you always feel like, who's the best one? Who's the best one?
Yeah. Who's the biggest? Who's the sparkliest?
And
absolutely.
And over time, it just becomes like, whoever's got the most money, to make the most expensive outfit in the quickest way. So that one is going to win out. So her approach was valuable, to say that actually I might not want to present myself that way, but I've got things that you just can't compete with.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of things we can't compete with, this segment every Tuesday,
Yep.
what are we going to be watching this week?
I'm going to be in Perth next week to see Björk, and
Amazing.
so I'm going to be missing next week.
Great.
Even though I would have loved to have both of you join me and talk about her.
Yes.
You know? But 2 weeks later, we'll be talking about Queer Australia. But it starts tonight on your ABC. Join comedian and professional lesbian Zoe Koomsma as we wipe away the straight washing, revealing the untold queer history of Australia.
So it starts
Perfect.
tonight, ABC TV.
Yeah, Queer Australia, a new docu-series. And I'll see you in 2 Tuesdays' time.
It doesn't have the same ring to it, but I love it. Thanks, Suzy.
And of course, today we were talking about Victorian Queens, currently streaming on iView and Apple TV. You're on Joy Drive.